Welcome, everyone, to the Spiritual Forum. I'm so glad you're here. What do I want to say to you this morning? I think that I want to remind you to sign up for my newsletter where you can get information about every episode that comes out. And I also usually add some reflections on my podcast experience in that newsletter and also an affirmation and information about my weekly prayer calls. So I'd love you to subscribe to that at thespiritualforum.org. I also have a whole planet spirituality retreat coming up October the 19th through the 22nd. And I'd love to have you check that out too at thespiritualforum.org/retreat. It is at Unity Village and it's a very, very sacred place. And this is the third year. And it's really the theme this year is Peace Begins with Me. And we're going to be looking at, in addition to all our speakers and workshops, we're going to be looking at how we can live in alignment with our values, our spiritual values, and find our inner peace, and also be advocates for all of life on this planet. So please check that out at thespiritualforum.org/retreat. Let me introduce my guest today. Benig Mauger is an internationally known Jungian psychotherapist, teacher, poet, and workshop leader. She's authored a number of critically acclaimed books, including Songs from the Womb, which sheds much needed light on the loss of soul encountered by many people due to the modern medicalized way of birth, which strips nature of its spiritual dimension. In addition to her writing and teaching, Benig maintains a private practice to help people heal from within. Her most recently published book, The Soul and the Sea, was written from her home by the sea in Connemara. Did I get that right?
You did,
Okay.
absolutely. Yes.
Connemara, Ireland, during the first 9 months of the COVID lockdown. Inspired by the sea and land around her home, she draws from her own life experiences as a Jungian therapist and spiritual teacher to illustrate how connection to nature and the spiritual world can heal emotional wounds. Welcome, Benig.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me on. I'm delighted to be able to speak to your listeners today from Ireland.
I love that. And I love that you're from Ireland. And as I'm reading your book, I just have this picture of your place in Ireland. And it just sounds so ideal, right near the ocean and those northern winds. And I'm sure I'm going to want to ask you to. I'm sure I'm going to ask you to tell me a little bit about that later. But first, I'd like to hear a little bit about your story. What do you want to tell us about who you are and how you came to be this spiritual teacher and an analyst? And I know your story is a long one, but whatever you want to tell
Mm.
in a fairly condensed fashion about your journey, your spiritual journey that could help our audience, would love to hear that now.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Well, I grew up in the west of Ireland. My parents were, you could say, refugees from France in the 1950s. We moved here. And I guess I grew up very much connected to the land and to the sort of a sense of the spirituality of the land. But anyway, I trained as an analyst in London, UK, and worked there for some time. And then I came back home to Ireland and had a practice there. But more importantly, I was always interested in birth, in childbirth, and um, in some way in the sort of spiritual and psychological aspects of how we're born and the impact of life in the womb, etc. So I had a birth center in London, the UK. I used to prepare women for childbirth and have couples come back afterwards, and um, did a lot of healing around the birthing experience. I had my first book published, I think it was, oh gosh, 20 years ago by already. It's ridiculous. Or more, 25 years ago. And then I moved back to Ireland and I had a private practice, but I began to write. I again wrote about the impact of the father from a Jungian perspective, how the father has a different energy to the mother and what he brings to the child, and what that means for us in relation when we have relationships later on, how we were fathered. And then I wrote another book which is about the experience of heartbreak and how that's a sacred initiation. And then this latest book, The Soul and the Sea, is very much taking the work of healing a little bit further in terms of that, although the insights from depth psychology no, undoubtedly help us when we're looking to heal, we need something more, especially today, in today's world, which I think there's an unprecedented spiritual awakening on many levels. And so the book is really bringing together psychology and spirituality, for emotional healing. And it's very rooted in the ground, in the sense that that's that's my work, bringing through the embodied feminine, which has been lost so much in the world, and that we need to reconnect with. I mean, that's a short version. And I'm a grandmother, so I'm in my crone years in the third age. In a nutshell, that's where I am now. And the spiritual aspect of my work, I think, is just stronger and stronger all the time.
Yeah, I think marrying the spiritual and the psychological is a much needed thing for our world. So it's really great work that you're doing. Can you tell us a little bit? I know in your book, you tell your own birth story a little bit and how that's impacted your life and why I'm thinking that might be why you were kind of attracted to the looking into
Mm,
why our birth stories or why birth experiences matter so much for us, even as grown-ups.
absolutely. I think that that's where the start of my journey as a healer was, the seeds of it from my own birth. I was born very premature, excuse me, in the middle of the west of Ireland, and my mother was quite ill. It was a sort of emergency cesarean, etc. And of course, I was in an incubator for 2 months because I was so small, and therefore no bonding and with my mother. And in later years, I would have gone into analysis myself, because in order to become a therapist, you have to be therapized, so called, and analyzed. And so I came to know the effect that um, this type of birth, the imprint of that, had on my soul. And basically, if you, in a nutshell, what it really means is, and many people feel a sense of abandonment, but it could be highlighted in that sort of birth experience where you're separated from your mother for a long time, 2 months. Although I'm sure I saw her here and there, because of where we were living, it was too far away. They didn't have a car, so they might have visited, but it's not the same. I'm 2 months old by the time I got taken home,
It's
so
so
it was difficult.
interesting. I mean, it's so interesting. I know when I grew up, I'm one of 5 children. I know my own mother had her own birth stories for each of us. And I know the ones that she
Mm.
told more were the ones that she felt some sort of loss over. And in her age, in her era, they were out. At least in the U.S., they put the women out. I mean, they were out gassed. They just don't have any recollection of the
Oh
baby
yeah,
being born,
yeah,
and so it's like the next
yeah.
day they meet their baby, and I think that whole generation
I
feels
know.
some sort of trauma from that, whether they know it or not.
Mm,
And I know for my mother,
mm.
her first child died full term baby died. And I know she had a lot of
Full
trauma over
term.
that. Yeah. But my parents never talked about it. They would not talk about it. They would not allow you to bring it up. They don't want to hear about it. That was also their generation,
Mm,
how they handled trauma, just kind of put it away. And but I think all women have their own birth story for each one of their children.
mm,
And I think that this shift from being surrounded by love and women and your tribe as you're going through this kind of very very natural process, it's been really lost with the hospital and the whole medicalization of that, which I know you cover in your book. But I mentioned to you of all the chapters in your book, that was one that I was particularly interested in, is the birth
mm.
room. So before we go into that, let me back up and let you tell a little bit about your book and how you organized it in terms of rooms. And then maybe I'll come back and ask you some questions about the birth room.
Okay, perfect. Now, first of all, I have to say I never organized the book at all. People say, "Oh, well, why did you decide to put the chapters as rooms?" I didn't. It really was a creative endeavor. And the book I could feel was just coming through me. And so I didn't think about it in advance, but basically the book is the chapters are called rooms and they have different colors. And they were really sort of um, a reflection of my meditations, my walks by the sea, my reflections, all of that. And it just sort of naturally, organically took shape that way. But the second part of the book, I take the reader into the therapy room, so called, or at least into looking at uh, real life experiences and how we can work with, for example, the birth room is birth trauma and various things. So I write stories. That's my nature. I'm a storyteller as well. I love writing. So then there's the life room and the death room. I had difficulty with the death room. I thought, how can I call a room a death room? I mean, nobody's going to read this. It's terrible, so morbid. But it was really about how we deal with death and bereavement. So, and all of us, when we reach a certain age, will have experienced it to our loved ones. So it's very much a book with that has specific exercises and I talk about dreams and the importance of writing your dreams and journaling and all the regular Jungian psychotherapeutic ways of working, um, and incorporate spiritual affirmation, spiritual exercises of different types, with the suggestion that this is going to help with. You see, the bottom line is, although we have been taught for many years, and we know that we need to go within to heal. Uh, we're so conditioned to looking outside of ourselves for love, for healing, for everything, that we forget that we have within us this immense healing power and the ability to heal ourselves. And in the Jungian language, we call this the archetype of the inner healer. So we have this wisdom in our own souls. And so I'm hoping the book kind of brings the reader to understand that you have within you the ability to heal and tremendous power to do so. And also nature, walking nature is hugely healing. I mean, I'm talking to you in the middle of a field. I mean, I'm above the beach and I have animals all around me and they are healing in themselves. So it's really connecting with the essence of nature, and learning from from nature as well. I believe we can do that.
Many of us know, as you say, that we can heal. The power of healing is within. We need to realize our divine nature. These are things that on the
Mm,
spiritual path we hear.
mm,
It's really about expressing our divinity, and we are
mm.
so powerful. And then I think people just it becomes something that's still in the head. Like how do we
Yeah,
do
yeah,
that?
that's it.
How do we do that? Like I know I'm divine. I know I can heal myself, but I'm still a complete mess. I'm still you know experiencing these patterns over and over again. I still bring the wrong people into my life. I still feel abandoned. I still feel, lost. I still feel inadequate. And I see this a lot in my own work with people. I've been a minister of a church. I've coached, counseled, spiritually counseled people. And there's this kind of I get it all, but I don't know what to do. um,
Mm, mm.
so do you think that in addition to like the meditation and these spiritual practices and the affirmations and all that nature really is like a key to this healing?
I think nature is a key to this, but it's more than that. It's that, because what you've just described, absolutely, totally, 100% agree with you. But when we feel those feelings, I'm still doing the wrong thing or getting the wrong people into my life or getting into a mess. Those are times when we're separated, when we're experiencing this separation from the divine, or we're not feeling loved, or there's something wrong with us. We're flawed. I mean, that's one of the biggest things. We're flawed, and therefore we're not good enough. So it's impossible to heal there. We have to literally, I think, just go within. And I guess for me, nature does help me, because that's for me, nature is a huge thing, connecting with the wisdom in the earth. But also going within, no, somehow, and poetry is the other one for me, reading Rumi and these sacred poets that remind you that you are divine. But let me go back up there to what you said. How do you? Okay, so when you reconnect with the sense that there is a greater plan at work in your life, there is something there. It's not about being passive either, but knowing that there is healing, there is a greater plan at work, and if you trust that plan, there is meaning. There is meaning for your spiritual journey, for your evolution. For example, going through heartbreak with the book I wrote about, Love in a Time of Broken Heart, that, your heartbreak is actually what you need to open to unconditional love, in experiencing heartbreak. And I write about different heart openings I had in my life. Talking about children, I think the day my children were born probably was a huge heart opening. And as a mother, you probably understand that, because these are just like blood, archetypal type of flesh openings that and not everybody has them. I mean, it is true that some people are very, very hurt and wounded and shut down. But I think the key is nature, but also our own hearts, connecting with our hearts and knowing it's okay to feel bad and to feel down. And okay, let me see, look, I'm going to look after myself today, and I'm going to go for a walk. I mean, when I go feel bad, I'm always outside. Outside will heal me. Walking by the sea will heal me. Or I might, if I'm in the town, in the city, I'll go for a massage. That's how it will help.
I think that
Yeah,
what you said in there is really important. That it's okay to feel bad. And I think that's part of our culture, that it's not okay to feel bad. Like if I feel bad, there's something
that's
wrong
right.
with that. And so I need to either put that somewhere else, negate it, ignore it, pretend it doesn't exist, or become distracted so I don't feel it. And some people can do that, others can't. But even the idea that feeling bad is bad or wrong, or it's not natural, or I need to always feel
That's
happy.
right.
And there's kind of this whole
That's
new age
exactly.
thing that's all about positivity, and it's all about the light. And I know in Jungian therapy that would be really something that would not be the way you would help a person
No,
with their challenges. But there's a lot of that out there.
there is a lot of that out there, and you could call it. It has been called the spiritual bypass.
Hmm.
That
Hmm.
you just cut off. And in fact, what I've learned, and I think The Soul and the Sea is probably my most grounded book in that sense, although all of them are. But what I've learned in my long years as a woman, and also as a therapist, is that it's our very humanity and where we fall, that actually is the greatest growth. The greatest. Leonard Cohen, his song, "There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." So within the wounding and the pain is the healing as well. So you don't have to feel wonderful, but you see, absolutely, I agree with you, and it happens all the time. I've got to get rid of this. I've got to self medicate, or go and get tablets, or whatever it is, or drink. I think people, though, are realizing that that's not the answer, because it isn't the answer.
Yeah, I think the hard
It's
one
not
for a lot.
working.
No, it's not working. I think that it's hard to overcome the distractions. I think people know that some of
Mm,
these these things that we do, like drink or drug ourselves, we all know that's not going to be right. But I think that distractions can be very, very invisible to us. Like we don't realize that the television has hypnotized us, or the phone has hypnotized us, or
absolutely.
yeah. And so
Mm,
it's a new way to anesthetize ourselves against the cracking that's happening. Um, so
mm,
in addition to just being
yeah.
aware of those things like distractions and the medication, and just I love the Rumi poetry you have in your book, and I can't remember if it's a Rumi poet or this is you saying it, but it was like, you can't heal it without feeling it, or you got to feel it to heal it.
Oh yeah.
So
That
there's
was
that.
me.
Okay, that was you. There we go. I just put you up on the same pedestal as Rumi.
You did, and thank you. Uh,
His poetry is so beautiful in there, and
but
yours is as well. But I
oh yeah.
underline his a lot. It's just amazing how wise a person he
Mhm.
is.
Yeah. But that was a big one that came in when I was doing my birthing work 30 years ago. What you can't feel, you can't heal. In other words, that it didn't really matter how women gave birth. What mattered was what they felt about it. What their feeling was, because if they had made a decision to go one way and then they were disappointed and it didn't go that way, there's all that stuff that goes on inside. And um, but then there are others that felt that the right decision was made and they went with it. So I think
And
that thing is very, very wise.
yeah, and so many things can happen in childbirth. I mean, so many things that you can't plan. It's not a thing you planned for. I mean, you're going to have your baby, but
No.
you have no idea, especially your first one. You have no idea what it's going to be like, what it really is. They talk about contractions, but you really don't know what that is. And for me, to circle back to my own experience that I kind of started bringing up in the beginning, I felt the whole. I mean, looking back, I didn't really realize this was happening at the time, but I became a procedure in the hospital. And I think that that's where
Yeah.
I feel so much loss, that here I am. The most important thing that's happening in my life is this life coming
Mm-mm.
through my body. And it was absolutely a phenomenal thing. I mean, it's so abstract, even though you're carrying a baby for 9 months and you're feeling her or him. Obviously you're having a baby, but until that child comes out of your body, at least for me, I was like absolutely in awe that this just happened.
Yeah, I
and
know.
but then I was a medical procedure. The nurses all have their thing they do with the baby. They kind of take the baby, they do this, they do that, and it's like, where's my baby? That's what happened for me. I,
Mm,
I lost my baby for hours because they had put her in some sort of line. This is my first child, some sort of line of,
mm.
washing, and I don't know what they were doing, but I just remember calling and saying, where's my
Yeah,
baby? Where's my baby? And
yeah, I know.
these are the kinds of things that I think are really sad for moms, because when you become a part of a procedure or some sort of a medical plan, you lose that naturalness. You lose that. What did you call it? You called it uh, the spiritual dimension. That the medicalized way of birth strips nature of its spiritual dimension. It's a spiritual experience, and I don't think it's meant
It
to
is.
be a medical experience.
That's the whole point, you see, that the medicalization of childbirth, yes, arguably has made birth safer in some ways, but again, it's an arguable point. But it also has taken away from women the sense that they can do it, or that they can't do it without the doctor, or that it's a medical problem, which it never was. I mean, hundreds of thousands of women have given birth, millions have given birth, in the fields and all of this before modernization of birth. But the main point is that women and their children can be very wounded by a very high-tech birth. And, the point is, how can we, um, I think what we need, because we have a huge uh, technological, explosion right now. So uh, what we need is to marry technology with respect for the human soul, and that hasn't been happening. Even some, I can tell you today, I had my last child 38 years ago, um, but I work with, I still work in that area, not so much now, but I still get women coming to me after birthing. But I can tell you, some of those birthing rooms resemble torture chambers. That is the truth.
Wow.
With forceps, with drugs, I mean, forceps is very violent. It's just too difficult to for so many women to be able to sort of get over that, because you're kind of told, well, I mean, I don't know why you're complaining, you have a healthy baby. And okay, you're not, it's not about complaining, it's about, I need to reclaim something here. I feel disempowered, particularly if your baby is removed from your body without you doing it. Now, you've already said you had good births, and I did too, although my first child was a forceps, and that's 45, 46 years ago, because his head was turned a different way and all of this. Um, but for some women, it can be a major thing to wake up and not have been present at the birth, if you see what I mean. And that can affect the child too. And we don't want to sound completely, for any listeners out there who had technological births, it's not to sound, oh my God, that's the end of the world. It's more just an awareness that, it's good to heal from any of this. And it's good for the child, and it's good for the child when it grows up, if it's still carrying something from the birth. It's just an awareness. That's all it is, an awareness, and then you can heal it.
Yeah, I agree. It's not about making anybody's choices or experiences wrong, but
No.
there may be healing opportunities there. And I think that we also are mistaken when we think or when we say things like, well, the baby forgets all that. I mean, you know, that happened when you were a baby. I mean, that happened when you were a baby. So that's not still carried on, but it is still carried on. There's something, because you even talk about in your book how babies, they're so innocent, and they've just come from God. I mean, they're as close to the divine as any beings on the planet. And so they are probably very sensitive, and things are imprinting on them early. This idea that when something happens to you when you're a baby and you forget it, that it doesn't carry into your life, that's just a mistaken idea.
I think it's very mistaken, and it's very misguided, and in many cultures. It's like Western cultures in particular, such as years ago in Ireland or Britain. If a parent died, the child would just not go to the funeral. I mean, children don't need to go to funerals.
Oh,
They
yeah.
don't need to
Hmm.
mourn. Now that's finished. I think everybody understands that children do have feelings like everybody else.
Yeah, I think they're still
Yeah,
missing the baby thing, though. I think still, the things that happen
maybe.
to a baby in childbirth, it impacted you. I think you had a lot of things in your life that you would draw back to your baby infant experience. So why not? Wouldn't that be the case for all the rest of us?
Mhm. And some of the patterns, as a therapist, for so many years of practice, some of the patterns in an individual can can be traced way back to birth or to life in the womb, which is why it's always my practice to um, ask my clients, when we're in the work at some point, what they know about their birth and or their time when their mother was carrying them in the womb. For example, if you're carried in your mother's womb during a war situation, where, as happened with some of the people I've worked with, where they would have to leave in the middle of the night and go to another place for safety. And I remember this particular person, she couldn't settle. She could not settle anywhere. And it seemed to go back to that early time.
Interesting. That's really interesting. I know for myself, it took me decades to discern that I was born into a family, a grieving family, because my parents would never talk about
Okay.
anything like grief.
Oh, yeah.
My father lost his whole family of a couple years, I think, before I was born. I mean, his mom and his dad and his 39-year-old brother, and would never talk about it. But I did my own depth therapy with a Jungian analyst or
Hmm.
Jungian therapist many, many years ago. And through that, I was able to discern that I was born into a family that was grieving, and
Yeah, yeah,
that impacts things. You know,
yeah,
I think it made me a very a sensitive child. I was very kind of concerned about everybody
yeah,
else's feelings. And
yeah.
is everybody else okay? Is everybody else okay? At least that's what I've kind of pointed it back to it. But you know, when you talk about healing from your childbirth experiences, one of the things that also came to me was I mentioned that my mother was not awake during any of her births, so she has no memory of any of her births. But when I gave birth to my first child, my mom came to deliver some food to my husband, and she ended up just staying and sitting in the corner. And she was there to watch the birth of my first child. And she said that's the
Mm.
first baby she ever saw born.
Wow. That must have been so healing
I think so,
for
because
her.
she had
Mm.
six births, five live children, six births. And at the time, I didn't realize how significant that was, but I think it was very significant for her, very healing and bonding. So anyway, I think this whole birth thing is just so interesting, and I'm really hoping, because so much of your the focus of your book and your work is this kind of grounding ourselves in nature, and you know, our authentic nature, and the wildness of the earth. And I'm
Mm.
really hoping that in this awakening that we're having, that can talk about in a few minutes, but I'm hoping that part of that is coming back to realizing that we can kind of reclaim our power in childbirth.
I hope so. I hope so. I don't, you see, I don't know what it's like in the US. I live in Ireland, and it's still quite high tech, but maybe not quite as much as, like, there are countries in Europe such as Holland where you know a lot of babies have very natural. They go home with the midwife and all of this. But yeah, I hope so. But there's so many changes happening. It really is important, I think, for women, or for and men, to reclaim the feminine within, which is the heart, the ability to feel, the and not to be cut off from our feelings, which is not going to lead us to any type of healing. And you know yourself, compassion, all of that can only come from your own heart. And if you're carrying so much pain around and ignoring it, trying to ignore it, it's going to come out somehow, isn't it?
Yeah, it's going to come out somehow. So this period that we're in now, of a massive awakening, do you
Mm.
do you see that this is about the feminine? Is the awakening about the feminine, or is it about the balance of the feminine and masculine? Is it about the feminine energies kind of resurgence
Yeah,
in our own selves?
I think from a historical and cultural perspective, it is about, you see, the masculine, aka sort of as expressed through the patriarchy and all of that, has been in power for more than 2,000 years. And or has been the ruling force. Before that, of course, we had the time of the goddess, and societies were completely different. So I think that has led to a huge imbalance uh, in man thinking that he is not man as in a man, I mean society, thinking that humanity in general, thinking that they are more powerful and the ruling force, and forget about the earth. The earth is suffering, the great mother Gaia, but animals and the way we treat them,
Oh,
and
it's
all of
horrible.
this. Yeah, so I think that I think it's a natural process now. I think there's you know, I think that if there was anything in the pandemic of a silver lining, it certainly was making people stop and think about what's important. What is important? Love, being with the people you love, nature, moving out of cities if you can, all of this. And uh, so I do think it's about the rise of the feminine again, and by that I mean feminine values, you know, in society and within each one of us. And um, I see that as a connection with the heart, with your emotion. I was this morning I was doing some work, and I came across a quote from Jung who talks about emotion, and I haven't got it written down there, but basically that it's emotion that um, constellates, if you like, the numinous. Do you know the numinous? The word the numinous, it's the transcendent function or the ability. The numinous is the divine in a way, or something that's capable of transforming into transformation. So I do think it's unprecedented at the moment, as in it seems to be natural, and people are all, I mean, everybody. When I was a child, nobody was, and certainly when my children were at school, nobody was talking about teaching mindfulness in schools or all of that. Children were not encouraged. Everything was learned by um, rhyme, and there wasn't room for uh, reflection. Now, I mean, I see my granddaughter. She seems to know instinctively. She'll just sit like this and go, ah.
That's so cute.
She'll connect with a few crystals. She's 7, just turned 7, and then after a few minutes, she'll say, "I think I'll go for breakfast." So, but children are, and there is an awareness of of spirituality. You see, that's the thing. There is an awareness of it, and people are buying books right, left, and center. Hopefully, they buy my book, but about spiritual fulfillment and learning to heal oneself. Everybody's interested in that, aren't they? Really, I mean, it's just there now, because we know what's been going on isn't working for us anymore, and all the old institutions such as the church, many old institutions, the medical system that was, all of that is kind of crumbling, and we're being thrown onto ourselves. I think this is the age. I have a spiritual master, her name is Saima, and she talks about this is the age of the throat chakra, connecting with your authenticity and your inner voice, speaking your truth. So it is very much the age of uh, individual, we take responsibility for our lives rather than putting it out there.
Yeah, seeking truth beyond our stories. Yeah, I'm thinking that it seems to me, at least in the United States, there's still a lot of divisions being kind of fomented, and just a lot of
Mm,
it feels like we're in like a last gasp, if nothing else,
yeah,
of this dominator
I agree
system.
with you.
Yeah, like it's going to buckle down. It's going to get harsher and harsher, as kind of a defense of itself, maybe that's what's happening. But and with the technology and AI and kind of the replacement of
Yeah.
humanity with technology, and where's that going to go? Is the human spirit going to transcend that, or are we going to go down this path and give up our humanity to fuse with technology to become an immortal soul, mechanized soul? Are we going to be able to stay rooted in our divinity and take the human path? Very interesting times that we're in.
Oh yeah, for sure, and very divided times because there are, those of us that are feel that we're awake and we want others. Can't you see? And then there are others who are not there. So there is a divisive time. But I do believe that the soul and the spirit, that we will get through this. I mean, maybe I'll be gone. I don't know. I hope I have many years left. My father lived to 101, so hopefully I still have a good deal of time yet to see the world become much more compassionate, and uh, that we live according to our hearts and with nature and all of that. I believe so.
I believe so too. I mean, I completely have faith in the divine, the
Yes.
divine always being in able to express itself through whatever difficult times we go through. That in the end, if there is an end, which there we know there is no end, but in human terms, that the divine
Mm,
within will prevail. But we may go through some tough times. I don't know. But
yeah.
I think that what one of the things that I've learned through COVID, and the COVID years really changed me a lot. But one of the things that really sticks with me is this importance of connection. Like, it doesn't matter how different I feel. It doesn't matter how disconnected I may be from a loved one or a friend, that we keep staying connected. We find connecting points. We reach out and find ways that our humanity can be with each other. And I think that's what's going to possibly be a tipping point, or at least contribute to this awakening, that we keep saying that connection is important, which is what you're saying about the heart.
Absolutely, and I think that this is the message, if you like, as well, of the time is the importance of community. You see, technology is amazing and has led us into all sorts of areas, but also it's not very human. You have to marry that with, um, I see it in children, young people who were raised in. Uh, when I was young, there was no computers, there was no internet. I mean, when I started my practice as a therapist, it was unheard of to actually do a session online,
Hmm.
let alone on the phone, let alone online, because it was thought that it was so disembodied. Now, we do know that it works, actually. It works very well because we've got a good connection, and it works well to do therapy online. But I'm talking about, young people who perhaps have lost the ability to form embodied relationships. And so they could end a relationship by a text,
Yes, it
without
happens all the time.
thinking.
I know,
Yeah,
not
I
even calling on the
know.
phone. It happens all the time. I
Yeah,
think that I just kind of shudder when I see toddlers that are handed these iPads and they're out to dinner with their,
I
may not
know.
happen where you are, but I see it all the time. They're out to dinner with their parents, and the parents, the kids just got an iPad or a phone. As a minister that does wedding ceremonies, I've had this happen before, where I'm meeting with a couple. They have a child and she's on the phone the whole time. 3-year-old playing, and
I
I
know.
suppose that
Yeah.
there may be a time for that. I don't know, but I'm really concerned about children and learning that out of boredom, they can imagine something amazing. There's a whole
Mm.
imaginary capacity that's being shut down with technology, and and
Yeah.
so if this transformation, this awakening that's we're in the process of, if it's going to be in the hands of the younger generation, which it is, and they don't have any experience with imagination, that's where my concern is. So it's
Yeah. Yeah.
everybody who has
Yeah.
babies out there, help them imagine, little children.
For sure. I agree.
Yeah, and I had an interesting interview with somebody named Dr. Edith Mbutu Chan, and she does a lot of alternative education with children outside of the school system. And she says she believes that there's a lot of she calls them luminous souls that are coming onto the planet. And it sounds like your
Yeah, I
granddaughter
think
might
so.
be one. Your
Yeah.
granddaughter who's meditating at 7 might be one. That some of these souls are coming on, and they're coming in with their healing energy, and that they really hold the potential to really take this awakening to the next level.
They do, and I think it's hard for the parents sometimes because I have a little my little granddaughter has a brother who's just over a year old, and I mean he's so advanced already. You can see he came into the world. He mostly laughs or is enjoying himself. He only cries if it's like he's in pain, physical pain. But it's quite hard for the parents, I think, because I think she's right. And I think they're coming in with a higher vibration at a higher level, and the parents don't know what to do. They might say, oh, well, we need to go, to church. Why? I'm God. I'm God. They're already higher vibration than they come in to teach us, I suppose, and to teach their parents as well, and take and lift the energy.
Yes, and I think that that is where so much hope is, to know that
Yeah,
this new generation is holding this vibration of healing and love and compassion. And I think that if we don't train it out of them, that there's just a lot of hope for them. So I've got a grandbaby coming in 4 weeks, so that's gonna be my
wonderful.
first. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, best of luck with that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's a big deal in our family. What would you like to go back and talk more about your book, and what would you like to convey about it? I think
Yeah,
I was going through the rooms myself this morning, and I may have this a little bit wrong, but I'm going to summarize this, and you tell me where I'm off. There's the red room that kind of describes the dark night of the soul. The pink room was about love and heartbreak. The blue room was about balancing feminine and masculine. The rose room was about abandonment and healing from that. The green room, what did I write down? I think healing from victim consciousness. Purple room dealt with dreams. Did I get those right?
you got them nearly all right, in fact, except I would add to the purple room is talking about dreams, but also um, interestingly enough, connecting to the throat chakra, which is
Okay, okay.
usually blue and not purple, but that connecting with the divine within ourselves, and that we're never alone. That we can, it's our connection with the sacred through the crown chakra. Um, and dreams, yeah, because dreams are one way in which we get a wisdom from our souls that speaks to us at night. So without the ego coming in and interfering, so we can get a lot of gems from our dreams. The green room was really about creativity, yes, and you're right about the looking at various archetypes within us and working with those, and connecting with the earth goddess in that way. The rose room was very much about yeah, about abandonment and healing abandonment. The pink room was taking you to meet Aphrodite, the goddess. And
Yes.
Aphrodite is the goddess of love, um, in Roman language, Venus. And I talk about that being an Aphrodite woman and what that actually means if we have a well developed Aphrodite, and how we learn about the balance of the masculine and feminine within us through the blue room. So each room sort of takes you into different rooms in your psyche. And I've just been, some of the feedback I've received, because the book's only been out a couple of weeks in America, maybe only 10 days. Um, uh, some of the feedback I got is, yeah, well, we go into the rooms with you, and then we leave the room, and it's so peaceful, and then we go back into a different room. People seem to like these rooms, and I never thought about it. It just came, instinctively. And I suppose the book, what I'd like to say as well is the book is not a big academic book. It is deeply rooted in Jungian theory, in Jungian psychology, but it's written as a story, and as a narrative. And I bring myself in because that's how I teach, is to bring my own story out. How better can you teach by just using yourself and your own story? So it's an easy book to navigate, and it has a lot of uh, um, not, I wouldn't call them exercises, but there are practical elements to it in terms of what you can do if you're dealing with bereavement or this or that, and lots of poetry. So I think it's a good book.
Yeah.
I think it's
I love the idea of the
it's very
rooms as well. I love the idea that we're
mhm,
entering into this room now, and this is kind of the space of this kind of healing
yes,
is happening in this
sacred,
room. Yeah, and I know for
sacred
myself,
space. Yeah,
my favorite dreams are dreams about houses and rooms, and I believe that that the homes or rooms represent the psyche, and I know that. And you can correct me if you're wrong. You're the analyst, but I know for me, like when I have dreams about rooms, I'm always finding rooms that, oh my gosh, I didn't know this room was in my house. And
I
I'm thinking,
know.
wow, that's
Yeah,
so interesting. It's like there's something I haven't explored yet in myself. I think that's what that means. But I love the idea of the rooms. And so it's really, really a great way. And what other also comes to me is the scripture, in my father's house are many mansions. And perhaps that scripture
yeah.
means something else or is intended for something else. But I think it still is about the psyche, that within us there are many houses, there are many rooms, and they're all
That's
places for us to explore.
That's absolutely right. And the book started, I mean, the Red Room, it basically, there was no plan, but that came from a dream, as you know, because it's written in the book, that I had a dream and I was in this red room, and I knew it was my room. So dreams had a big part to play in this book, and I couldn't think of the subtitle. I had the title, the publisher, and I couldn't think of a proper subtitle. And one night I had a dream when I was in France. The dream was I saw the book in front of my eyes, and it said "Essential Healing for Everyday Life" was the subtitle. So I wrote to the publishers quickly, and I said, "I've had this dream. I've got this new subtitle," and they said, "Yeah, that's brilliant." So that was
Great.
really good. So
Yes.
I kind of feel it came from it came from the divine as well, the healing
Right.
goddess, let's say.
Yeah. I think our dreams inform us in very, very important ways. I want to close, Benig, but I thought if you could give us a couple minutes of why it's called the soul in the sea, and what is the significance of the sea to you, and what living by the sea does for you. Can you share that?
Yeah, I can try. I think, particularly if you read the introduction, because it's really my life when I was a little child and growing up by the sea. I think that the sea to me is the great feminine, the mother, and all of that. But she connects me when I listen, particularly at night, if I have the windows open, if the weather's good enough, um, connects me with the feminine aspect of my soul. And I suppose it's a very soulful, the sea is very soulful. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to put too many words to it because it kind of destroys the beauty of it. But
Hmm.
um, I do feel I was destined to, that was part of my soul journey to be born here, even though my family are French. But to be born here in this remote place. And as a little girl, I was always outside in nature. Um, and to do this work, I feel connected to the land here. I just feel it. That doesn't mean I don't love going to Spain and having 2 or 3 months in the winter in a warm climate and connecting with the energy of Spain. It doesn't mean that, but it, so the soul in the sea. I don't know. It wasn't a difficult title to find. I wasn't sure. It was going to be called Healing from Within, which is the subtitle of my last book because it is all about healing from within. But then the sea was speaking to me all the time, it seemed.
It was very
And I
attractive
do
to
feel the
me.
healing. Yeah, and I do feel the healing. That's another thing during the pandemic. Everybody started swimming. People were going into the water in midwinter because of the healing benefits of the sea. Somehow she came alive, and maybe that is the embodiment of the feminine, the sacred feminine coming through to us. You probably live near lakes, do you?
I
Wisconsin.
always live near
You
water in
near?
some way. I've got a lake out back and a big pond on this side, and then the Great Lakes aren't that far from me, Lake Michigan. But I know that when I'm on the coast, there's something about the sea that's just she can be calm, it can be tumultuous, and it's very, very powerful. And I love also being by the sea at night with the windows open and just hearing the waves.
Oh
There's
yeah.
something just so, so comforting about that. And
Mm.
I've kind of wondered if some of it is that we are birthed in waters. I've just kind of wondered if, in the womb we're in waters.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that the bigger you get, the less water there is around you, but that we kind of come from waters, and so I'm just wondering if we also are just attracted to waters. Just it's something that attracts us, like a place that we want to be. Like there's a healing
Very
place there.
elemental. It,
Hmm.
it's
Yeah.
very elemental, and I think water is very connected with healing. You find that in
Hmm.
dreams again. That sometimes in dreams or in artistic work, that if people are stuck, sometimes they dream of frozen lakes, or they can't break the ice, they can't. So when water comes, it's emotion. I used to dream, and I know you want to finish, but I used to have these dreams very regularly of having burst pipes in my house and
Ah.
having to go and get the builder to fix them. And one day I was in analysis time. I looked up the thing and we were talking. It was like, so I had too much emotion, you see, and so too much
Oh, it was
water, and it was
bursting. Ah,
escaping. Yes,
I get that. The pipes
Mm,
couldn't contain
yeah,
it. Yeah, I completely get
yes.
that. Yeah. I think it's a good thing to watch for is water in dreams and how the water shows up in our dreams. Yeah. Okay, well, I'll just give you another minute. Do you have anything else that you want to say that you didn't get a chance to say? Any last words? Any last
Um,
message?
well, I, I've been delighted to speak with you, and uh, I'm just setting up a new system on my website to um, do regular meditations and spiritual gatherings every week. And I'm setting up a new sort of membership thing on my website, which I didn't before because it's so difficult to, that way I can share my work and my teachings with more people than just having individual sessions. So I'm just encouraging people to have a look at my website, which is the same as my name, benigmauger.com.
And I'll have that on the podcast page
Yeah.
so people can
And
contact
it's
you.
been lovely talking to you. Feel a nice connection.
It has been. I really enjoyed this. I was very attracted to the name of your book, Soul in the Sea. So at least for me, it was a really good name for the book. And I love the idea of the healing rooms. And I really, really appreciate your focus around healing from our birth experiences. I think all of that's just really, really good work. So thank you for being with me
Thank you.
today.
Thank you. And thank you for having me.
Yes, and thank you, listeners. I know people were blessed by this podcast today. So thank you, everybody. And I now close the Spiritual Forum.